July 30th, 1944, 3:47 p.m., Normandy, France. Staff Sergeant Jack Coleman pressed the last strip of olive drab tape across the pink compact mirror, securing it to the inner rim of his Sherman tank's commander's hatch. The mirror was small, barely larger than his palm, with a crack running diagonally across one corner and a faded rose pattern etched into its metal backing. His girlfriend Mary had sent it 3 weeks ago in a care package, along with a photograph, 2 packs of Lucky Strikes, and a letter that smelled faintly of her perfume. The mirror had been meant as a joke. "So you can make sure you still look handsome," she'd written. Coleman had laughed when he first pulled it from the box, his crew ribbing him about checking his hair before combat. But that was before Sergeant Davies caught a sniper's bullet 15 seconds after sticking his head out of the hatch to orient his tank. That was before Coleman realized that the most dangerous position in a Sherman wasn't gunner or loader. It was commander, the man who had to expose himself to see. "Coleman, what the hell are you doing?" Coleman's hand froze on the tape. Captain Richard Harris stood beside the tank, hands on his hips, face already reddening in the late afternoon sun. At 42, Harris was old for a company commander. Too old, some said. But he'd earned his rank in North Africa and believed in leading from the front, hatch open, head exposed, the way tank commanders were supposed to fight. "Installing a periscope alternative, sir," Coleman said carefully, climbing down from the turret. "A mirror system for observation without exposure." Harris stepped closer, examining the pink compact mirror with its civilian origins, obvious despite the military tape. His jaw tightened. "That's a woman's makeup mirror." "Yes, sir, but it provides a 60-degree field of view without—" "Without what, Sergeant? Without you having to stick your head up and do your goddamn job." Harris's voice carried across the assembly area. Other crews stopped their maintenance work, watching. "You're a tank commander. Your job is to command your tank. That means getting your head out of that hatch and keeping your eyes on the battlefield." Coleman felt heat creep up his neck. "With respect, sir, a dead commander can't command anything." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Harris took a step closer, speaking quietly enough that only Coleman could hear. "Are you scared, Sergeant?" The question hung between them like cordite smoke. Coleman knew the right answer, the expected answer, but he thought of Davies's body being dragged from the burning wreck of his Sherman, thought of the 3 other tank commanders his battalion had lost in the past month, all killed by snipers, machine guns, or artillery while exposed in their hatches. "I'm cautious, sir. There's a difference." "Is there?" Harris gestured at the mirror. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a man hiding behind a piece of cosmetic glass, hoping the war will be kind enough to let him see without being seen. That's not how we fight. That's not how Americans fight. Sir, if I can see the enemy without exposing myself—" "Then you're fighting like a coward." Harris said it flatly, as if stating an obvious fact. "I don't care what excuses you wrap it in. Remove that mirror. That's an order." Coleman's hands clenched at his sides. He could feel the weight of every eye in the company on him, could hear the whispered comments starting among the other crews, but he also felt the weight of responsibility for the 4 men who depended on him: Tommy Johnson, his gunner, Red Richards, his driver, Bert Close, his assistant driver, and Willis Euler, his loader. "Yes, sir," Coleman said finally. Harris nodded, satisfied, and walked away to inspect the next tank. Coleman climbed back onto his Sherman, hands shaking slightly as he began peeling the tape away from the mirror. But he didn't throw it away. Instead, he slipped it into his coverall pocket, feeling the cool metal against his chest like a secret. That night, after Harris had retired to his tent and the company settled into the exhausted sleep of men who knew tomorrow might bring death, Coleman climbed back onto his tank. He worked by moonlight, using electrical tape from his repair kit to mount the mirror on the interior rim of the hatch. Invisible from outside, visible from his position when seated in the commander's position. The angle wasn't perfect, but with a slight adjustment of his seat, he could see forward and to both sides without exposing more than his eyes above the hatch rim. Sarge, Coleman nearly dropped the tape roll. Tommy Johnson stood below, barely visible in the darkness. "Jesus, Tommy! Trying to give me a heart attack?" Johnson climbed up, moving with the careful silence of a man who'd learned to avoid attention. At 19, he was the youngest member of Coleman's crew, a farm kid from Iowa who'd lied about his age to enlist and turned out to have a gift for gunnery. He peered at the mirror installation, then at Coleman. "The guys are talking," Johnson said quietly. "They're calling you Mirror Mary, saying you're too scared to fight proper." Coleman continued working on the tape, not looking at his gunner. "What do you think?" "I think Sergeant Davies is dead because he stuck his head up at the wrong time." "I think Lieutenant Morrison's dead for the same reason. I think—" Johnson paused. "I think if that mirror keeps you alive long enough to get us through this war, I don't care what people call you." Coleman stopped working, meeting Johnson's eyes in the darkness. "You mean that?" "Sarge, you kept us alive through 3 weeks of hedgerow fighting. You put us in positions where we could shoot first and withdraw clean. You haven't taken a single scratch of paint on Lucky 7 while most of the company has been hit at least once." Johnson gestured at the mirror. "If this is part of how you do that, then the other crews can call you whatever they want. I'd rather have a live commander with a mirror than a dead one who was too proud to use one." The words settled something in Coleman's chest that had been twisted tight since Harris's confrontation. "Tell the others I'm not hiding. Tell them this is about fighting smart, not fighting scared." "I'll tell them," Johnson said. "But Sarge, most of them won't listen until you prove it." The proving. The next week passed in a grinding advance through French countryside that seemed designed by a sadistic god to favor defenders. Every hedgerow concealed potential ambush. Every village offered 100 firing positions. The Shermans of A Company advanced in bounds, covering each other, trying to present as few targets as possible while still maintaining momentum. Coleman used his mirror constantly, scanning for threats before committing to movement. He saw things other commanders missed: the glint of an anti-tank gun barrel nested in a hedgerow, the telltale disturbance of camouflage netting that marked a Panzer position, the movement of infantry working around his flank. Each time he maneuvered Lucky 7 to advantageous positions, took the shot, and withdrew before counterfire could find them. But the other commanders noticed what they saw as cowardice. Lieutenant Barnes, commanding 2nd Platoon's lead tank, made a point of standing fully exposed in his hatch during every advance, presenting what he called proper command presence. His crew took a Panzerfaust hit 2 days later, killing Barnes and his loader. Captain Harris personally led the evacuation of the survivors, then assigned the damaged Sherman to be towed back for repairs. That night, Harris called a company meeting. 23 tanks remained operational from the original 32 that had landed at Normandy. Commanders gathered around Harris's map table while crews stood in loose clusters nearby, smoking, talking in low voices. "Gentlemen," Harris began, "we've lost good men. Too many good men. Some to enemy fire we couldn't avoid, but some—" His eyes flickered toward Coleman. "Because we're not maintaining proper situational awareness. When you button up inside your tanks, you lose perspective. You lose the ability to command effectively. I need commanders who are willing to expose themselves to properly control their vehicles." "Sir," Coleman spoke up before he could stop himself, "permission to speak freely?" Harris's expression suggested this was not permission he wanted to grant, but several other commanders were watching. "Go ahead, Sergeant." Davies, Morrison, and Barnes were all fully exposed when they were hit. Meanwhile, Lucky 7 hasn't taken a scratch. and we've got 4 confirmed kills and 2 assists. Maybe the problem isn't commanders who stay protected. Maybe it's commanders who expose themselves unnecessarily. The temperature around the map table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Harris stepped closer to Coleman, voice tight with controlled anger. "Are you suggesting that Lieutenant Barnes died because he was brave?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting he died because being brave and being dead aren't mutually exclusive. I'm suggesting that maybe there's a way to fight that doesn't require choosing between effective command and survival." "And what way is that, Sergeant? Your little mirror trick?" Harris's tone made clear what he thought of mirror tricks. "Have you considered that your survival rate might have more to do with luck than tactics? That maybe you're just being assigned easier routes because I don't trust you to handle real combat?" Coleman felt something snap inside him. Not anger, but clarity. "Then give me the hardest route tomorrow, sir. Put me on point. Let me prove whether it's luck or tactics." The challenge hung in the air. Around the table, other commanders exchanged glances. Harris stared at Coleman for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fine. Tomorrow morning, Aero 600, we advance toward Mortain. Intelligence suggests light opposition, but I want the route scouted aggressively. Your platoon takes point, Coleman. Full exposure, no hiding behind your mirrors. You'll lead the way a commander should. Head up, eyes forward, understood?" Coleman felt his crew's eyes on him from where they stood with the other enlisted men. Johnson's expression was worried. Richards looked grim, but they were all watching to see what he would do. "Understood, sir. Point position 0600, head up." "Good." Harris turned back to the map, dismissing Coleman with the movement. "The rest of you, standard advance protocols. We push hard tomorrow. Intelligence thinks the Germans are pulling back to consolidate. I want to catch them before they get organized." The meeting broke up. Coleman walked back to Lucky 7, aware of the whispers following him. Johnson caught up, pulling him aside. "Sarge, you can't seriously be planning to go without the mirror?" "Of course not," Coleman said quietly, "but I need to find out something first." The hunter waits 30 kilometers away, in a small village whose name would never appear in history books. Hauptmann Kurt Fischer sat in his Panther tank and studied a map by the dim light of a hooded flashlight. At 38, Fischer was a veteran of the Eastern Front. 2 years of fighting across Russia's endless steppes, through its brutal winters against an enemy that seemed to have infinite reserves of men and material. He'd earned the Knight's Cross at Kursk, where his company destroyed 27 Soviet tanks in a single day. He'd survived Stalingrad by the simple expedient of not being there. His unit had been pulled back for rest and refit just before the encirclement. Now he commanded a reduced company of Panzer Layer Division, 6 Panthers where there should have been 14. The Americans were advancing relentlessly, grinding forward with numbers that seemed inexhaustible. Every Panther Fischer lost was irreplaceable. Every American Sherman destroyed was replaced within days. But here, in this valley approaching Mortain, Fischer had something rare: advantage. The terrain narrowed to a corridor barely 500 meters wide, flanked by ridges on both sides. His 3 operational Panthers were positioned on those ridges, hidden in camouflaged positions with clear fields of fire across the valley floor. Any American column moving through would be trapped, unable to maneuver, presenting perfect flank shots to Panthers with armor and guns far superior to anything the Shermans could bring to bear. Hauptmann Fischer's gunner, Unteroffizier Hans Muller, leaned over from his position. "The Americans, they will come tomorrow. Intelligence says dawn, maybe mid-morning." Fischer traced the likely American route on his map. "They're pushing hard, maybe getting overconfident. They'll come fast, wanting to maintain momentum." "How many?" "Maybe a platoon, 4 or 5 Shermans. Possibly a full company if they're feeling aggressive. Either way." Fisher smiled without humor. This valley will be their grave. Muller nodded, then paused. Have you noticed, Hauptmann, the Americans are fighting differently lately? More carefully. They don't expose themselves as much. Different crews, probably. The experienced ones learn to be cautious. The new ones, Fisher shrugged. The new ones make the same mistakes our new crews made in Russia. They learn or they die. That's war. Still, Muller persisted, I saw something odd yesterday through the binoculars. One of their tank commanders had something mounted in his hatch. Looked like a mirror, maybe? Pink, like a woman's compact? Fisher started laughing. You're telling me the Americans have gotten so desperate they're using makeup mirrors to fight? I saw it, Hauptmann. Definitely a mirror, definitely pink. Fisher's laughter spread to the rest of the crew. The absurdity of it. American tankers so frightened they needed cosmetic mirrors to peek over their hatches, like scared children checking for monsters under the bed. Maybe we should send them some lipstick, too, Fisher said, still chuckling. Help them look pretty when they die. He keyed his radio. All Panthers, this is Hunter Leader. Tomorrow we face an enemy who brings makeup to a tank battle. Remember this when you shoot. You're killing men too frightened to fight like soldiers. This will be easy. Hunter Leader out. Fisher settled back in his commander's seat, confident. In 2 years of combat, he'd learned that fear was contagious and deadly. An army that fought scared was an army that died. And any army whose soldiers hid behind women's mirrors was already beaten. He had no idea how wrong he was. August 7th, 1944, 05:47 hours. Coleman hadn't slept. He'd spent the night checking and rechecking Lucky 7 systems, loading extra ammunition, positioning every tool and supply for maximum efficiency. His crew moved quietly around him, each man dealing with pre-battle tension in his own way. Richards chain-smoked by the driver's hatch. Close methodically cleaned the bow machine gun for the 4th time. Euler organized ammunition with obsessive precision. Johnson sat in the gunner's position, dry-firing the 75mm gun, working through aiming drills. Sarge, Richards finally broke the silence. You don't have to do this. Tell Harris you won't go without the mirror. And then what? Coleman asked. Get relieved of command? Branded as a coward officially instead of just unofficially? No. This is the only way forward. We prove the mirror works, or we die trying. Cheerful, Close muttered. Realistic, Coleman corrected. He climbed into the commander's position, adjusted his seat, and looked up through the hatch. The mirror was still there, mounted on the interior where nobody else could see it. Coleman had spent hours the previous night adjusting the angle, using measurements and geometry borrowed from his high school math classes to maximize the field of view while minimizing his exposure. The key insight had come at Euro 200 when exhaustion had worn away his fear enough to think clearly. Harris wanted him to lead with head up, eyes forward. He'd said nothing about how far up his head needed to be, or what eyes forward actually meant. Coleman could maintain visual awareness through the mirror, while technically keeping his eyes forward and his head above the hatch rim. Just barely above, just his eyes presenting minimal target. Listen up, Coleman said, gathering his crew's attention. Today we fight smart. Harris thinks I'm going to get myself killed by sticking my head up like every other dead commander. He's wrong. I'm going to use the mirror exactly as I've been using it, but I'm going to do it in a way that technically follows his orders. That's called malicious compliance, Johnson said, grinning. That's called survival, Coleman corrected. Tommy, I need you to trust my fire commands completely. I'll be seeing things you can't see, calling targets based on mirror views. Don't question, just shoot. Got it, Sarge. Red, same goes for driving. I may call movements that don't make sense from your perspective. Trust me. Richards nodded, crushing out his cigarette. You kept us alive this long. Bert, keep that bowgun ready. We're on point, which means anything we flush will try to flank us. Close chambered around. Ready? Willis, ammunition cycling is going to be critical. I want he loaded first. If we hit infantry, I want to shred them. But be ready to switch to AP immediately if I call armor. On it, Euler confirmed. Coleman checked his watch. Vo 554, 6 minutes, he keyed his radio. Lucky 7 to Hunter Leader. Harris's voice crackled back. Go ahead, 7. Ready for point position. Good. Remember, Coleman, head up, eyes forward, like a proper commander. Head up, eyes forward, understood. Coleman clicked off the radio and pulled on his headset. Start her up, Red. The Ford GAA engine rumbled to life. 500 horsepower of American engineering that would need every bit of power in the next few hours. Coleman adjusted his position, getting comfortable with the relationship between his seat height, the mirror angle, and the minimal head exposure that technically satisfied Harris's orders while actually maximizing his survival chances. At exactly 0600, Lucky 7 rolled forward, leading a company into the valley that would become either Coleman's vindication or his grave. The Valley of Death. The morning sun broke over the eastern ridge, painting the valley in shades of gold and green that would have been beautiful in any other context. Coleman watched through his mirror as the terrain narrowed, feeling the tactical wrongness of the position in his gut. Red, slow to 10 kilometers per hour. Keep ready to reverse on my command. Copy, slowing. Through the mirror's limited field, Coleman scanned constantly, looking for the signs that marked ambush positions. Disturbed earth, unnatural camouflage, the telltale shadow lines of concealed vehicles. The valley was too quiet, too perfect. If he were setting an ambush, this is exactly where he'd do it. Tommy, traverse left, elevation +5. See that tree line on the ridge? Got it. Watch for muzzle flash. My gut says we're walking into something. Understood. Behind Lucky 7, the rest of the platoon followed in column. 4 more Shermans trusting Coleman's point work. Behind them, the company spread out as much as the narrow valley allowed. 23 tanks pushing forward into terrain that screamed ambush to anyone paying attention. Through his radio, Coleman heard Captain Harris's voice. All units maintain speed. Intelligence shows light opposition ahead. We want to... The world exploded. The Panther's 75mm gun spoke first, a crack that echoed off the valley walls. The shot struck the 3rd Sherman in Coleman's column, Lieutenant Watson's tank, squarely in the turret side. The American tank lurched to a stop, smoke billowing from hatches. Seconds later, ammunition cooked off inside, turning the Sherman into a funeral pyre. Contact right, Coleman screamed into the radio. Panzer on the right ridge, approximate bearing. A second shot from the left ridge. The 4th Sherman took a hit in the engine deck, fire erupting as fuel ignited. The crew bailed out, running for cover, while machine gun fire from the ridges cut down 2 of them. Reverse, reverse, reverse! Multiple voices screamed the command simultaneously. The Shermans tried to back up, but the narrow valley constricted movement. Tanks collided, blocking each other. Coleman, in the lead, had something the others didn't: clear forward space and a commanding officer who'd insisted he take point. While chaos erupted behind him, Coleman had room to maneuver. Red, hard right behind that farmhouse at 2 o'clock. Going! Lucky 7 pivoted, tracks churning soil, moving obliquely toward cover. Through the mirror, Coleman saw the 3rd Panther's gun traverse, tracking them, then stop, blocked by the farmhouse. They'd made it to cover before becoming target number 3. All units, break contact, Harris's voice tight with controlled panic. Withdraw to... The radio cut off as Captain Harris's Sherman took a direct hit. The tank commander who'd insisted on fighting with his head fully exposed didn't have time to close his hatch. The 75mm round passed through the turret where Harris had been standing, killing him and his loader instantly. In less than 90 seconds, 4 Shermans were burning, 23 tanks had become 19, and Coleman's tank, Lucky 7, commanded by the man others called Mirror Mary, was the only one in position to do anything about it. Through his mirror, Coleman analyzed the tactical situation with the cold clarity that came from knowing death was seconds away unless he made exactly the right decisions. 3 Panthers, 1 on the right ridge, 2 on the left, all in concealed positions with superior elevation, superior armor, superior guns. His Sherman had mobility, coordination, and one thing the Germans would never expect: a commander who could see without being seen. Tommy, I'm going to call 3 targets in sequence. I need you to trust every shot. Ready, Sarge. Willis, load AP. We're going Panzer hunting. 4 minutes that changed everything Coleman had read about time dilation in combat, how seconds stretched into hours when adrenaline flooded your system. He'd never experienced it until that moment when his mind seemed to accelerate beyond normal human cognition, processing tactical information at impossible speed. Through the mirror, he saw the rightmost Panther adjusting fire, preparing to engage the disabled Sherman crews running for cover. The German commander was visible, head and shoulders exposed, directing his gunner. Classic mistake, same one Harris had made. Red, hard reverse, 45-degree pivot left. The Sherman lurched backward, pivoting to unmask its gun toward the right ridge. Through the mirror, Coleman saw the Panther commander notice the movement, saw him shout something to his crew. Target Panther, right ridge, 400 meters, visible hull between trees. Identified. Johnson's voice was steady, professional. Fire when ready. The 75mm gun cracked, the Sherman rocking back on its suspension. Through the mirror, Coleman watched the AP round streak toward the Panther's position. The German tank had superior frontal armor, but Coleman had called a side shot. The Panther was angled to engage targets in the valley, exposing its flank to Coleman's unorthodox firing position. The round struck the Panther's lower hull, penetrating the thinner side armor. The German tank shuddered, smoke erupting from hatches. Crew members bailed out, the commander clutching a wounded arm. 1 down. Elapsed time, 83 seconds. Red, forward now, hard right behind those hedgerows. Lucky 7 surged forward seeking new cover before the remaining 2 Panthers could reacquire. Coleman knew they'd be confused. Shermans didn't typically push toward Panthers, certainly not alone, and definitely not with the tactical precision Lucky 7 was displaying. Through the mirror, Coleman tracked the 2nd Panther on the left ridge. This crew was more cautious. Commander buttoned up inside, working through closed periscopes. Safer but slower. They were scanning for targets, trying to locate the Sherman that had just killed their platoon mate. Coleman found them first. The Panther was hull down behind a stone wall, only turret visible, presenting the smallest possible target. A frontal shot was suicide. The Panther's glacis armor would bounce any round Coleman's 75mm could fire. He needed angle, needed position. Tommy, traverse maximum left, elevation +8, turret only target, stand by. Jesus, Sarge, I know what it is, stand by. Through the mirror, Coleman watched the Panther commander's periscope rotate, searching. The German was good, methodical, checking sectors systematically. In seconds, he'd spot Lucky 7's new position. Red, on my mark, full throttle forward, straight at the Panther. Straight at, Sarge, that's suicide. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark! The Sherman lunged forward, engine roaring, 33 tons of American steel charging directly toward a German tank designed to kill Shermans from a kilometer away. Through the mirror, Coleman saw the Panther commander's periscope lock onto them, saw the long 75mm gun traverse to track the approaching target. What the German commander couldn't see What the mirror showed Coleman but the Panther's limited periscope vision missed was the terrain. Lucky 7 was charging along a slight fold in the ground that created a dead zone directly in front of the Panther's position. The German gun couldn't depress far enough to engage without the Panther backing up. "Red, halt! Tommy, target turret ring, fire!" 20 meters from the Panther, close enough to see rivets in the armor, Johnson fired. The AP round struck where the Panther's turret met its hull, a weak point, the seam between armor plates. The round penetrated, detonating the ammunition stored inside. The Panther's turret lifted off its hull in a geyser of flame and flying metal, tumbling end over end before crashing down 50 meters away. No one inside could have survived. 2 down. Elapsed time, 2 minutes, 47 seconds. Coleman allowed himself 3 seconds to breathe. Through his radio, he heard chaos. Other companies trying to coordinate, units calling for artillery support, someone screaming for medics. But in his immediate tactical space, only one threat remained. The 3rd Panther, somewhere on the left ridge, commanded by the German who'd set this ambush. Coleman knew this crew would be different. They'd just watched 2 Panthers die in rapid succession to a single Sherman that somehow saw them before they saw it, that moved with tactical precision no American crew should possess. They'd be hunting him now, specifically hunting him. Through the mirror, Coleman scanned the ridgeline. Nothing. The Panther commander was good, had repositioned after seeing his platoon destroyed, was there. A flicker of movement, visible only because Coleman was looking through the mirror at an angle that caught sunlight on metal. The 3rd Panther had displaced to a new position, hull down behind a destroyed farmhouse, only the edge of its turret visible, and the gun was already traversed toward Lucky 7's position. "Red, reverse now!" The Sherman lurched backward as the Panther's gun spoke. The round passed through the space Lucky 7 had occupied half a second earlier, close enough that Coleman felt the pressure wave. If he'd been standing fully exposed in his hatch the way Harris had demanded, his head would have been removed from his shoulders. But Coleman wasn't standing exposed. He was using the mirror, seeing without being seen, fighting smart instead of brave. "Tommy, I need you to do something crazy." Crazier than charging a Panther head-on? Much crazier. Coleman's mind raced through angles, positions, timing. That Panther knows where we are now. He's going to expect us to retreat, reposition, do something defensive. What are we going to do? We're going to advance into his firing lane and make him miss. "Sarge, have you lost your trust me? Red, on my command, full throttle forward, but start with a hard right pivot. I'm going to call a serpentine pattern. Follow exactly when I call." "This is insane," Richards muttered, but his hands were already on the controls. "Willis, load he. We're not penetrating his frontal armor, but I've got another idea." He loaded. Through the mirror, Coleman calculated angles, distances, timing. The Panther was good, but it was also heavy, slow to traverse, designed for long-range precision fire. Lucky 7 was lighter, more agile, could turn inside the Panther's reaction time if Coleman called the movements correctly. "Red, execute, hard right, full throttle." Lucky 7 burst from cover, tracks throwing mud, engine screaming. Through the mirror, Coleman saw the Panther's gun traverse, tracking, the German gunner's experience evident in how smoothly he led the target. "Hard left now." The Sherman pivoted, changing direction just as the Panther fired. The round passed meters to the right, missing cleanly. Right again, right, zig, zag, forward, advance. Lucky 7 charged across open ground, moving erratically, closing distance while the Panther tried desperately to track a target that refused to move predictably. Twice more the German gun spoke, and twice more Coleman's serpentine pattern put Lucky 7 outside the impact zone. 50 meters, 40, 30. "Red, halt and pivot, Tommy. Target the ground 3 meters in front of the Panther. Fire for effect." The ground, Sarge. Just do it. The 75mm cracked, firing he instead of AP. The round struck the earth directly in front of the Panther's position, detonating in a geyser of soil and stone. Shrapnel sprayed across the Panther's frontal armor, and more critically, across its periscopes. Blinded, the German commander had two choices: button up completely and fight blind, or open the hatch to see. He opened the hatch. Coleman saw the movement through his mirror, the Panther's commander exposing himself for visual identification, just as Coleman had been told to do, just as Harris had demanded, just as every tank commander manual recommended. Tommy, target Panther commander, coax gun, fire. The Sherman's coaxial .30 caliber machine gun chattered, tracers streaking toward the exposed German. The Panther's commander collapsed back into the turret, wounded or dead. Without its commander, the Panther was effectively neutralized. Crew buttoned up, periscopes damaged, unable to coordinate effective fire. He, again, Tommy, target turret base, fire for effect. 3 more rounds slammed into the immobilized Panther, each impact damage compounding. Finally, the German crew had enough. The driver's hatch popped open, white flag waving, surrender. 3 Panthers destroyed or disabled. Total elapsed time, 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Coleman slumped in his commander's seat, hands shaking, breath coming in ragged gasps. Through his radio, confused voices called for status, tried to coordinate, demanded to know what had happened. "This is Lucky 7 to all units," Coleman transmitted. "Ambush neutralized, 3 Panthers destroyed. Enemy survivors surrendering. Valley is clear for advance." A long silence followed. Then Lieutenant Morrison's voice. He'd assumed command after Harris was killed. "7, this is Morrison. Say again, you engaged 3 Panthers alone?" "Affirmative. They're down." "How the hell—" Morrison stopped, started again. "All units advance to 7's position. Medics prepare for wounded evacuation. Coleman, maintain position and secure enemy prisoners." "Copy." Coleman looked down at the mirror mounted in his hatch, its pink surface now coated with dust and smoke residue, the crack in the corner a little bit larger from vibration. The absurd little piece of civilian glass that his girlfriend had sent as a joke, that Captain Harris had called a coward's tool. The mirror that had just saved his life and won an impossible victory. After the battle, the German prisoners were secured by early afternoon. Hauptmann Kurt Fischer, the Panther commander who'd set the ambush, had survived, wounded but alive, captured along with 14 of his men. American medics treated his injuries while MPs prepared to transport the POWs to holding facilities. Coleman watched as they loaded Fisher onto a medical truck. The German officer's eyes met his, and something passed between them, a professional recognition, warrior to warrior. "You," Fisher said in heavily accented English. "The mirror commander." Coleman nodded, unsure what to say. "My gunner told me yesterday. We laughed. We thought you were afraid." Fisher winced as medics adjusted his bandages. "We were wrong. You were smart. We confused fear with wisdom." "I was afraid," Coleman admitted. "Still am." "Then you're wise twice over, to feel fear and to act anyway." Fisher coughed, then continued. "In Russia, we learned a saying. The soldier who survives fights differently than the soldier who dies bravely. I thought it meant we should be more aggressive, more fearless. Today, you taught me what it actually meant. Survive first, win second. They're not the same thing." "They never are," Coleman said. Fisher was loaded into the truck, but he leaned back for one last statement. "That mirror, it's a good trick. You should teach it to others. The war won't be won by brave dead men. It will be won by smart men who refuse to die unnecessarily." The truck drove away. Coleman stood in the valley, surrounded by the wreckage of the battle. 3 burned Panthers, 4 destroyed American tanks. Too many body bags being loaded onto trucks. The victory felt hollow, paid for in blood even though they'd won. "Sarge," Johnson approached, followed by the rest of the crew. All 5 men from Lucky 7, alive, uninjured, miraculously intact. "The other crews want to know," Johnson said carefully, "about the mirror, how you used it, whether they can do the same." Coleman looked at his gunner, then at the rest of his crew, then at the assembled remnants of A Company, 19 tanks now commanded by 19 men who'd watched a Sherman with a pink compact mirror destroy 3 Panthers in less than 5 minutes. "Tell them to bring whatever mirrors they can find," Coleman said. "I'll show them how to mount them, how to adjust angles for maximum field of view, how to fight smart instead of just fighting brave. If it saves even one life, it's worth whatever names people want to call us." "Yes, Sarge." By nightfall, 7 more Shermans had improvised mirrors mounted in their hatches. By the end of the week, it was 19. By the end of August, the modification had spread throughout Third Army, with official recognition from division headquarters recommending the technique. By the end of the war, American tank design would incorporate proper periscopic systems as standard equipment, born from a field innovation that had saved thousands of lives. But that night, as Coleman sat on Lucky 7's turret and wrote a letter to Mary by the light of a hooded flashlight, he wasn't thinking about military innovation or tactical evolution. He was thinking about how a simple gift sent with a joke and a prayer had become the difference between life and death. "Dear Mary," he wrote, "you'll never believe what happened today with that mirror you sent." Epilogue: Staff Sergeant Jack Coleman survived the war, returning to Pittsburgh in November 1945. He married Mary in December, went back to work as a mechanic, and seldom spoke about his military service. The pink compact mirror he'd used in combat sat in a drawer in his workshop, next to his Purple Heart and Silver Star, decorations awarded for actions he felt were simply common sense rather than heroism. The Army's official after-action reports credit Coleman with 3 confirmed Panther kills in a single engagement, one of the most successful single-tank actions of the European campaign. His tactical innovations with mirror-assisted command were studied at Fort Knox and incorporated into post-war tank commander training. Hauptmann Kurt Fischer spent the remainder of the war in American POW camps, where he was treated well enough that he chose to immigrate to the United States afterward. In a strange twist of fate, he ended up in Pittsburgh, where he opened a small auto repair shop 3 blocks from Coleman's garage. The 2 men became friends, occasionally having lunch to discuss their shared experiences. In 1963, when Coleman's daughter asked him about the war, he showed her the mirror, now carefully preserved in a small wooden box. "Dad," she asked, "were you a hero?" Coleman thought about it for a long time. He thought about Captain Harris, who died because military doctrine said commanders should expose themselves. He thought about Davies and Morrison and Barnes, good men killed by following rules that didn't account for reality. He thought about the 3 Panther crews who'd laughed at a pink mirror before learning too late that innovation matters more than tradition. "No, sweetheart," he finally said. "I wasn't a hero. I was just a man who decided that surviving was more important than looking brave. Sometimes that's enough." The mirror still sits in the Coleman family home today, a small piece of pink glass with a crack in one corner, a reminder that the simplest innovations, born from the most basic human desire to live, can change the course of history. 3 Panthers, 4 minutes, 1 mirror. Sometimes survival is the ultimate victory.